Welcome to Modern Farm Business Podcast. This podcast is designed to help the farm leader bring their business to the next level. We'll cover everything from leadership and finance to strategy and planning. I'm your host, Dean Hefta. It's hard to believe, but this is our 50th episode of Modern Farm Business Podcast. I've so much enjoyed all of the different guests and topics that we've been able to cover and bring to you as listeners. And I appreciate so much the feedback that I get from you on the things that you like and the things that are meaningful for you. I thought today we'd take a little bit of a review over some of the things that have stood out to me over these 50 episodes. And what I did is I went back and went through some of the guests that we've had on, some of the topics that have been really impactful. And we've got so many different things that I encourage you, if you haven't listened to some of the previous episodes, if you're a new listener, go back, browse through some of the topics we have, pick out some of the things that look interesting to you, check it out. I've taken just 5 of our guests here today and thought we'd pull some things out that they've shared with us, that they've given us as gifts that we can apply in our life so we can make our businesses better, our relationships stronger, and things for us just better all around. So I want to start with episode 13. We're joined by Joseph Grinney, who is one of the authors of the multi-million copy selling book, Crucial Conversations. And one of the things that he shared was, talking about those times when it's hard to have a tough conversation. Emotions are high, and tools that we can use to manage ourselves in those moments and how we can be our best when we're having that conversation. And one of his phrases is, when it's safe, you can say anything. And that seems tough sometimes for us, that, emotions can run high, but you can have really tough conversations without creating defensiveness or it leading to arguments. And what that requires is the creation of psychological safety in that relationship. It's not so much the content of the words. It really relates to how we feel with that person. Are we feeling safe with that person? And what he identified is how safe I feel relates to me knowing 2 things. The first is that I know that person cares about my interests and concerns, that they have my best interests in mind, and that they really do have good intentions. So that isn't any tricks or tactics. It is simply, what is it I'm doing in the relationship to lead them to understanding that I care about their interests? I am concerned about their concerns, and that I truly have their best interests in mind, and my intentions are sound. There's many things that we can do. I mean, you don't build a relationship overnight. So do we have that type of strength where they feel they can answer that in a positive way? The second piece of it is called mutual respect. And that is, do they know that regardless of what I say or do, they respect me as a person? So this gets into that separation of the behavior from the person. Do they still accept me? Do they still view me as a worthy individual, regardless of what I've said or what I've done? And that, as well as the knowing about their interests and concerns, combined, lead to a safe relationship where we can then speak candidly, share our concerns, be open. It speaks to the relationship that we have established that allows us to have these open and crucial conversations. When that's in place, dialogue happens. If not, defensiveness comes, emotions go up, understanding goes down. Back in episode 21, we focused on negotiation skills, a benefit not only for business owners, but actually something everyone should be able to use in their life. I spoke with Richard Schell, who authored a couple of the best negotiation books out there, Bargaining for Advantage and The Art of Woo. During that conversation, Richard shared with us some of his insights and tips for better negotiation. And one of the things that he hit on was, there isn't a right style. You have to be situational. You have to look at what's going on right now and how do I adapt. So you need to know many different styles, but a part of that is knowing your own style. What is your typical approach? And he categorized these into two different ones. One being a more competitive style, which is more, I'm going to win and you're going to lose in this negotiation. It doesn't mean it's bad. There's a place for that. But there's also the cooperative style, which is, I think we can both win. And what he clarified was, people might think win-win is always best, but that's not necessarily the case. Understand our style, understand the situation. And if I am traditionally a competitive negotiator, what I might risk is I could end up destroying the relationship in the process. And so while I might win in the short term, I might end up losing over the long haul. Flip side is the cooperative tendency might lead to too much willingness to give in too early or too soon in order to get to an agreement. And so knowing that can affect how we prepare for the negotiation. So if I'm oriented to maybe giving in too soon, I might use tools like considering who else I'm negotiating on behalf of, my partners, the people in my family, etc. And we can be stronger and more bold and defend our position more so if we take on the position of negotiating on behalf of somebody else. So some tools there. When you think about the preparation, you really need to focus on two different areas, the outcome and the relationship. And in that negotiation, we have to be managing both of them simultaneously. That really ties into what is our tendency and how we negotiate. Are we competitive? Are we cooperative? And in the process of the negotiation, keep in mind the outcome that we want to have and the relationship that we want to maintain. Navy submarine captain David Marquet was my guest on episode 31, where he shared his story of taking over one of the worst submarines in the Navy and helping to turn that into one of the highest rated, and the process that he went through and some of the discoveries he had of recognizing that he had to shift how he led and his approach and philosophy of leadership, and some of the principles that he identified that are important in having a different type of leadership in that environment, away from the traditional command and control, top-down, I have the answers, you do what I tell you. He recognized very quickly that if they were going to turn that ship around, they could not continue top-down management in that environment. And so he shared with us 4 principles that we can consider and apply in our world. And one of them was, what's the outcome that you want today? What's the outcome that you want long term? What is it that you want? You might be able to get a win today or get the stock price up today. But is your true goal to really develop people that can think and grow people and their capacity to lead and make decisions in the long term? And if you have that long-term mindset, it is going to shift how you approach that conversation in the moment, how you approach the relationship. The second was, he said, make it safe. And, that ties right back to Joseph Grinney's point about the safety of the relationship. And what he found was, back when we're dealing with just maybe physical activity and physical labor in our world, you could be a bit more harsh or reactive, or maybe some of the issues weren't as pronounced when we weren't leading at our highest level. But we were relying on our team to make decisions, to use their minds, to be effective with technology and high-level responsibility. And when we create a stressful environment, it affects people's thinking. And so as leaders, we have to be very conscious of what's the stress that we're creating in that environment. The third point was, he said, push authority to the information. Traditionally, it was looking for paths to bring the information to the decision makers that were far removed from where the action was. For him, it is about, how do I get the appropriate level of authority out to where the information is, so that decisions can happen more quickly and be more informed when they're making them. The fourth one was, when giving authority, you have to dial it into their level of competency. So it's not appropriate as leaders for us to just hand over a huge decision to somebody that is not prepared to be able to make it. we have to be intentional about how we grow their capacity and their abilities and their understanding so that over time they can continue to grow their ability to make sound decisions. The fourth episode I wanted to touch on was from performance coach Ben Newman, who I talked with in episode 38. He talked about building and leaving a legacy, and he works with top performers in sports and business. What he found was, don't be afraid to think and dream big. Establish big goals, but then don't stop there. Come back and really focus on doing the work that needs to get done towards that goal. That's where the real power is what are the disciplines that we can have every day to work towards those big goals. And what he finds is that the top performers over time, they don't get seduced by success. So they win a championship, they get a big sale. They don't say, oh, great, I'm awesome, I'm great, now I can sit back and enjoy the success. So he said, celebrate the success. But the celebration shouldn't mean that we rest on our laurels and that we sit back. And he finds that the top performers continue to focus on the disciplines and the behaviors that have led to their success. The last one I want to hit on, Cy Wakeman, this is a very recent episode, talks about ditching the drama, reality-based leadership. In that interview, we got to talking about accountability. And when she's looking at her team, when she's looking at an organization's team, there's a couple of things that she's measuring. One is, how do you establish and measure the value of the work the person is doing? Or me as an individual, how do I measure my work? And she has three things that she's watching. One is, are you delivering on what the organization needs? Or are you just doing things that you find enjoyable? When we think about how our role fits into an organization, that value is tied into what does the organization need, and am I delivering on that? The second was staying relevant. Am I continuing to hone my skills? Am I learning new things so that I can continue to contribute at a higher level every week? And the third was, do they resist workplace drama? Am I prone to getting sucked into gossip and talking about people, or am I able to rise above that and say, that's really not relevant to what I'm focused on right now. I'm focused on delivering for the company, and the drama is not something that's going to help me to do that. And so she's observing, are people resistant to that drama? Because if you have an entire culture that's resistant to it, well, then any one person coming in isn't going to find an audience for their gossip. And they either end up leaving or they realize that it's of no use. And so why bother trying to create that drama? Second piece was how to measure accountability. Now, she said you can't really hold people accountable. It really is about understanding their own level of accountability that they bring with them. And so she's watching for and asking for what's their level of commitment and buy-in to what we're asking people to do, to this project, to this objective, to this goal. The second is, how resilient are you? If we're going to accomplish something together, if we're going to accomplish something big, we're going to run into hurdles and challenges and setbacks. How quickly and how eagerly will you be able to bounce back from those hurdles and those setbacks? The third was owning your consequences, right? So the results that you get, are you willing to own them? If you didn't hit the target, if you didn't get the result, are you responsible enough to step up and say, hey, I own that, and not blaming it on your circumstances? The fourth is this continuous learning. This accountability is tied to, is this person always learning something new so they can become more and more valuable? Because that's demonstrating that they're taking responsibility for their contribution, for becoming valuable to the organization, rather than sitting back and waiting for somebody to do it for them. Those were just 5 great episodes I wanted to touch on as we celebrate our 50th Modern Farm Business podcast together. We'll include links to those original shows in the PDF notes for this episode. There are so many more and so many great insights that I again, encourage you to go back, check out some of those episodes if you haven't listened to them again. Many of them are valuable to listen to a second and a third time because there's so many great insights. I appreciate you and joining me on this Modern Farm Business podcast. Please send me any questions, insights, thoughts that you have to dean@modernfarmbusiness.com. And I look forward to being with you again next week.